I'm a pretty offline person. I live under a rock. In fact, a couple of years ago, I just stopped trying to keep up with politics because I found it so frustrating and upsetting. But for a while now, I've been hearing that they're trying to build an AI data center in Utah, in fact, very close to me. And it's pretty universally opposed by like every citizen in the state. And it's such an absurdly bad idea that I figured it would get stopped as like with any environmental study. But then just last week, the local commissioners voted to approve the project. So I decided to look into like, what is going on here? So I was sent this Facebook post from someone who attended the Box Elder Commission meetings. And from there, I've done a lot of reading about the topic. And holy crap, this whole thing is just disgustingly corrupt. So first off, why didn't it get stopped by an environmental study? Because the governor gets to ignore the rules. In 2007, something called MIDA was created to facilitate the development of military property in Utah. So basically, in 2007, they wanted to make what is called the Falcon Hill Aerospace Research Park, but it was difficult because the land involved was located in 2 counties and 4 cities, creating a challenge for the Air Force in coordinating land use, local taxes, municipal services, and economic development. So MIDA was created to act as a single authority to interface with the Air Force. Basically, as I understand it, letting them override all the individual county and city regulations and zoning laws and do whatever they wanted for profit. And it is for profit. As from what I've read, MIDA is specifically made to make deals with private for-profit projects so long as they can say it benefits the Air Force in some way. MIDA's board is composed of 8 people, 7 voting members and 1 non-voting member. Governor Cox gets to appoint 5 of the voting parties, and the other 2 are appointed by the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. So, as I understand it, this effectively makes it so that Cox has control over what MIDA will do, and once the governor and the legislature designate something to be classified as a MIDA project, they, quote, have the ability to circumvent normal governmental approval processes such as development, approval, and building permits. So here's a summary of what that means in my interpretation. MIDA is heavily influenced, if not controlled, by the governor, currently Governor Cox, as he gets to decide who is allowed to be on the board. Once a project is designated as a MIDA project, they get to ignore the local requirements that would normally restrict a project. So, if you're rich and powerful enough to work with MIDA, you can do things that regular citizens like you and me would never be allowed to do. Again, this is according to my interpretation. I'm not a primary source. And of course, you'll hear officials saying things like they don't get any personal payment or benefit from the projects. But politicians have so many shady and corrupt ways to pay each other off and accept bribes that I really don't accept them at their word. Some other points that play into how they're getting away with this according to the reading I've done. 1. The land being used for the AI data center is currently unzoned, and no zoning means it can be used in any way that the landowner seems fit. It also means that the project didn't need any local planning commission input or approval before being greenlit. 2. Because MIDA gets to legally play by its own rules, when the commissioners voted yes last week, they were basically just voting yes on a project they had no input or control over, and could not actually deny due to the lack of zoning of the land. 3. The local commissioners are quoted having said, quote, "Our vote today had nothing to do with water or air quality. Those are not issues that the county has any control over." Basically, they were just voting on whether the project was following the law as written, which it technically is, since the law says MIDA gets to do what they want. I'm not trying to really defend the local commissioners. I don't approve of their behavior at the meetings. And while they say they're not getting any sort of benefit from this deal, I have no way of verifying that claim, and I don't trust politicians who vote against their citizens. But currently, it seems like the blame is being placed pretty publicly on them, when the real villains in my eyes seem to be Governor Cox and the legislature that allowed this project to be classified under MIDA. And of course, the private investors behind the project like Kevin O'Leary, but at least their public destruction is being done as private citizens. I think that public servants like Governor Cox, who seem to be blatantly ignoring the voices of the very citizens that voted them into office, are their own level of appalling. The power situation is also absurd. The data center planned for Box Elder County will be built on 40,000 acres of land and will consume over twice the amount of energy used in the entirety of the state of Utah. Utah uses 4 gigawatts, and the data center will use 9 when it's complete. There's also a nuclear power plant being built in Box Elder County, and I and a lot of people I've talked to about this have assumed that the data center would be powered by nuclear, but no, it's going to be powered by natural gas. So of course, this raises concerns that our infrastructure will now be strained to support this massive structure, while the citizens are forced to pay increased power costs to subsidize it. And while Kevin O'Leary has been quoted saying that the 40,000 acre AI data center will be powered by their own turbines on site, therefore not affecting the power grid, He's also quoted saying that the extra power generated could be fed back into the grid to help the state power needs. So, which is it? Is the site disconnected from the grid and self-sufficient? Or is it wired into the grid, which would be required in the event of excess power being routed to the grid? Given the rest of the shady disregard for the public good, I have very, very low hopes. And let's not forget about water. Utah is a desert! The commissioner said that they can't control what the landowners do with the water rights of the private land. Okay, sure, that makes sense. You should be entitled to the rights that come with your property. Except that private citizens with land in Box Elder County are already having their water monitored and limited directly against the supposed water rights that come with their land. Another example of you only have rights if you can afford them, I guess. Apparently, the Division of Water, who is responsible for creating water rights and making sure that there is enough water to sustain those rights, says that the project will have enough water rights for the project. But does that mean that they have just the rights to enough water, or that there actually is enough water? It's a very vital difference, and it sure seems like an environmental impact study should be required to check that. The development says that the data center will be using a closed-loop cooling system that will clean the water used in cooling and then pump it back into the aquifer, which they say will use less water than ranching does. I haven't found very good information on this, and so much of this is being done through strange channels that I really don't know what the impact on water would be. It might actually be okay, but it's hard to trust people telling you it's all going to be fine while they also talk over, insult, and ignore anyone with concerns. Oh, and by the way, the water rights for this data center would be coming from Bar H Ranch, which currently holds the water rights in the area. The application filed for this reassigning of water had nearly 4,000 protests filed against it. According to Cache Valley Daily, it costs $15 to file a water right protest with the state, meaning citizens spent around $60,000 just trying to get their voices heard. Then, on May 5th, the application was withdrawn! A huge victory, right? No, it wasn't. The application was withdrawn as a way to avoid the 4,000 protests filed. They have already stated that they intend to move forward with the project, and they said that they will be refiling with even more reasons why they're allowed to take the water now that the local commissioners have voted to approve the project. Which also means that citizens will be required to refile their protests and pay yet another fee to do so. Isn't it cool how they can just ignore our peaceful protests like this? And let's not forget about the tax breaks. I'm paraphrasing this from an article on Deseret.com. The tax breaks for the project will include a 100% personal property tax relief on the data center portion of the project. Real property tax on the commute campus would be taxed at a rate of 0.927%, but 80% of that tax revenue would be returned to the developers, with the state and MIDA sharing the proceeds of the remaining 20%. So they're getting a super reduced rate and getting 80% of that back. The energy use tax will be reduced from 6% to 0.5%. So from 6% to 0.5%. So not only are they using back channels to get this project pushed through, they're also getting an astronomically better deal than someone who went through the intended channels would, which means that someone who dealt more transparently would never be able to compete with them. So, where does that leave us citizens of Utah? This project might be okay for Utah. They claim the turbines used for natural gas energy production are clean and that the closed-loop water cooling will not be a major strain on water. But this whole thing is being done through very questionable channels, specifically aiming to avoid typical oversight and processes that would protect Utah and her citizens. So how am I or anyone else supposed to feel confident about it? The way I see it, Cox and MIDA get to do what they want. The local governing bodies can't stop them, and they have so much money and power behind them they can pull slimy stunts to ignore your protests. So I have no idea what the hell we can do. I'd love to be able to protest this and make a difference, but Cox, O'Leary, and others involved in this project will likely just get on TV and call protesters fake paid actors or immature crybabies who don't know the facts, and will likely just steamroll our rights to get their own personal payday. So I guess be ready to refile your protests. And maybe reconsider who you vote for next time the office of governor is up for election.